Episode of your Biz and Career Buzz. I'm Leigh Mitchell, the host of this amazing chat, and this is Kadine Cooper, and we're here today this week to talk to you about how to maintain your mental health during a
Mhm.
career transition. And we're going to talk about this from different lenses as those of us who are going through a career transition, those of us that are HR professionals or career coaches, and what we can do to support each other to have a more respectful and peaceful and happy process of
Mhm.
going through our job journey. So, Kadine, welcome. Why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thank you. So thanks so much for having me, Liz. I think this is our first time doing it as me being one of your coaches. So um,
Yeah.
my name is Kadine Cooper. I am a career transition coach, consultant, trainer, and speaker. I like to say that I help ambitious women who are stuck kind of on that corporate ladder. My superpower is kind of coaching that manager or executive who are experiencing kind of like stress and the impact of walking the tightrope between their being that high achiever in the workplace and being their best at home with their family life. So I kind of help you to use your unique values and your skills to kind of show up, to regain clarity, and to show up as the top talent that you are.
I love it, and we're so lucky to have you as our the Women in Biz Network resident career coach. For those of you who don't know a little bit about me, my name is Leigh Mitchell, and I'm an inclusive HR strategist with a marketing and branding background. And I help employers to make uh, their career. I help to make those that are in their working within their positions to make them more inclusive for those that are looking to um, join more diverse organizations. And as maybe business owners or HR professionals, we want to be more inclusive, and we want to help people feel a greater sense of belonging in the workplace, but we don't always know where to start. So we help
Mhm.
through our vetted career board, as well as coaching and training HR and business professionals to develop a more inclusive hiring practice, because those with more diverse um, workforces are more profitable, are happier. There's more psychological safety. So there's so many wonderful things that
Mhm.
can happen when we make more inclusive hiring practices. So, Kadine, welcome again. And yeah, why don't you start by sharing with us, um, maybe a job journey that you've gone through, and whether it be a positive or a negative experience, what stood out to you?
Well, I think one of the most important things to remember is that we're human beings. We're not human doings. We're human beings, right? So treat people with respect, treat people with empathy. Let's just talk about even the recruitment process. I've heard from time and time again from multiple candidates that recruiters don't get back to them. They don't know where they stand in the hiring process. And that's something that I truly prided myself on. It's just an email or a phone call if you can, but even just an email just to close that loop with that candidate, because they're putting themselves out there, and there's nothing worse than feeling demotivated and degraded because you took the time to prep for this interview, you took the time to kind of put your references together or your resume or your LinkedIn profile, to make sure that it's optimized, and then to go through that process and not hear back can really leave an impact. And I think it's also thinking about your brand. So I always was very, and still am, very protective of my brand, Leigh, because I feel like I'm going to be Kadine Cooper no matter where I go. So it's super important to me to make sure that I protect that brand, Kadine Cooper, but also any brand that I'm attaching and associating myself with as well is also very important to me. So yeah, I think it just treat people how you would like to be treated, and even if it's just an email, just to close the loop with that individual. And if someone responds to you or reaches out to you on LinkedIn, just common courtesy. Maybe now is not the best time. I'm a little bit busy right now, but let's circle back maybe in a couple weeks or so. But just at least to acknowledge someone that they're a human being and they've reached out to you to connect with you. So that's the first thing that I kind of wanted to say, just to set the tone there, is that just treat people with empathy, treat people with compassion, right? Everyone's going through or has been through or is going to go through something at some point in their life. So just show each other some grace as well.
I love that. Thank you. I think, yeah, just putting yourself in the other person's shoes is
Mhm.
so important because we never know what people are going through. And
Yeah.
this month being May and Mental Health Month,
Mhm.
I know you and I have both been very open about our mental health challenges
Yes.
and, coping with anxiety and different things like that. And so that can make the whole career transition um journey really stressful, right? Because if you
Mhm.
already have an existing mental health challenge, and it's hard to say that anybody hasn't been experiencing that. Maybe you had like a clear, wonderful mental health, uh, you know, diagnosis throughout your whole life. But the last couple of years, I don't know anyone whose mental health hasn't suffered.
Mhm.
And for
Yeah.
those from diverse backgrounds, especially women, they have definitely fared the worst in terms of mental health because they've had so much put on them, you know.
Mhm.
And yeah, so from a mental health standpoint, what tips can you share to deal with the uncertainty, the fear, the not knowing. And for
Mm.
those that are listening, please feel free to include your questions. This is a live chat. We're here to help you. So if you have questions that you want answered, please put them in the chat, whether you're on Facebook or um, LinkedIn Live. We're here to help you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Leigh. And exactly what you just said. I think it's so important for us to first and foremost acknowledge that, mental health is something that everyone during this time, I think if you even had it before, it's been escalated or, you know what I mean? It's been heightened during this time. So it's so important to recognize that, to sit with those feelings. But some of the tips that I can share is affirmations, I think have helped me a tremendous amount. Supporting a supportive community has also been very helpful, and being kind with yourself, finding whatever it is. There's a couple I'm in Clubhouse quite a bit, so there's a couple positive or notes to self rooms that I'm in, or daily dose of positivity. So it could be a podcast, it could be there's tons of them even on YouTube that I like to tune in and listen to. So be mindful of what you're putting into your ears and into your space as well. And I've even adapted this little motto recently, and it's like, anything that causes me my peace is too expensive and I can't afford it. I can't afford it, right? So healthy boundaries, right? Establishing those healthy boundaries. And maybe you're in a transition right now where you're like, you've just lost your job. You've been working with an organization for like 15, 20 years, and now you're back out in the job market. It's new. So be gentle with yourself and build relationships and networks with individuals that maybe you're in an industry that you want to tap into. Maybe you use this time to either figure out, do I want to go back to school, right? So do some self-reflection. I think that's the biggest thing too that will help to kind of calm you down or ground you a little bit, is think of it as the time that you've been gifted with. What can I do during this time that I've been gifted with? Who can I connect with? Who can I build relationships with? And what kind of habits and rituals on a daily basis can I even adapt? Like for myself, I journal. I do the positive affirmations. I have a pretty great network or community of women that I connect with on a regular basis. So people that are going to lift you up and build you up, that can support you on this journey, I think are super key.
I love that you talk about people that can lift you up, and you're definitely one of those people to me. Whenever I'm dealing with transitions, you're one of the first people that I reach out to for advice. And I know that we've talked about a bit about imposter syndrome, and
Yeah.
not always owning your talents and second guessing yourself, questioning how good you are at things. Fearful of trying something new.
Mhm.
We all have been there, I'm sure, if we're honest with ourselves. So what type of advice would you give to those that are dealing with maybe just feeling like they're not good enough?
Play into your strengths. We all have value, right? We all have something to offer. So think about the time when you were doing well and you were doing awesome. Think about performance reviews that you've had and things that were spoken highly of you. I think for so many of us, we have these, SWOT analysis that we do for our companies or a department of finance. Think about your own SWOT analysis. What are your strengths? What are you good at? What have you been told that you're awesome at? And that's something that, in terms of mental health, that I rely on sometimes when I'm down in those kind of funky moods, is I go back to those testimonials, or I go back to those, kudos that I've had, and I read them. I read them to say, okay, So I may not be feeling that great right now, but this too shall pass, right? And there are amazing things that have been said about me, or amazing things or transitions that I've helped others through. So this is just a moment in time where I might be feeling a little bit like I'm in my saboteur phase, or I'm allowing that negative self-talk to get into my head for whatever reason. So it's really thinking back to those times when you weren't in that space. That kind of sometimes helps me. You know, what are the amazing things that have been said about you? Think about those. Try to get yourself into that frame of mind and not so much focusing on the negative.
I love that piece of advice, and that's so true because our minds are hardwired for negativity, and so it's easy to hold on to the one negative thing that you heard. It could
Mhm.
have been said to you, years ago. I know myself. Years ago, I had someone tell me once that that I could, needed to work on my public speaking skills, and it hurt, right? I mean,
Mhm.
I knew that that was an area that I had a lot of fear in. It's something I still, even though I'm much more comfortable, I still struggle with. I get tripped up. I want everything to be perfect. But you've got to hold on to the opposite of those thoughts, like those times that people have reached out, like you, for example, reaching out to me after I spoke at a conference, saying how much you connected to what I had to say in terms of
Yeah,
mental health, and just making an impact with one person who has a meaningful thing to say about how you made a difference in their life can be all you need, really.
yeah.
Yeah, and the wonderful Hazel Harrison, who is
Thank you
the
so
Laurier women's entrepreneurship guru. She's incredible. She's also the owner of an addictions technology company and a certified business advisor. And so lately, she shares that she talks to herself like her own best friend. I love that,
Thank
Hazel.
you.
Good
Yeah,
idea. Love it.
yeah.
So
I-
yeah,
Great
great
idea.
piece of great piece of advice. I try to remind myself, right? Like if I'm hard on myself, I say, what would my friend say? Or if I were talking to
Mhm.
a friend, would I talk that way to the person? So
Right.
so that's a really good piece of advice. So here's another thing. There was the whole talk about in the great resignation that we had a lot of people who were leaving jobs before they had something to go to. And so
Yeah.
and they were talking about how a lot of people regretted that, not having something to go to first, or say
Mhm.
perhaps they decided, you know what, I don't think I want to be an entrepreneur anymore. Or sorry, I don't want to be in a career, where I don't have control over my destiny. I want to be an entrepreneur. And then they make that change, and then crickets, right? They're not getting business the way they thought they would. They thought it would be
Right.
easier or whatever, and now they're beating themselves up because they've made a huge change in their lives. It wasn't like something like, cuz when you lose a job and you don't have control over, it's stressful and it's upsetting, but you're not going to
Mhm.
beat yourself up, hopefully,
Right.
because because you have no control over that, right? Like that's what they say
Exactly.
about entrepreneurship. That's so amazing about entrepreneurship is we think of it as being so risk adverse.
Yes.
Um, uh, but or sorry, we think about it as being something that has a lot of risk in it, but
Hmm.
yet, we're the boss. So we're not hopefully not going to fire ourselves unless we
Yeah.
decide that we want to transition back into working for someone because it's too much for us. Um, so what advice would you give to someone who made that choice, that
Mhm.
didn't have something happen to them? They made a conscious choice to change their lives, and now they're freaking panicking. What do you do?
Well, I can speak from experience with that, because when I made the decision back in 2019 to step away from corporate, and then I joined a small boutique agency, and to step away from that, there was a lot going on in my life at the time. And so I felt like I needed to take care of myself. And I truly believe that if you're no good to you, you're no good to anybody. So I had to take that moment. But did I freak out? Yes. I think 2 or 3 weeks into that decision of walking away, I was like, what have I done? I've got a family. I've got responsibilities. What have I done? But it was weighing, what was most important. And my mental health was being challenged and impacted at the time. So I was like, okay, my mental health is being challenged here. I need to take a step back and take care of myself. to be honest, I didn't even set out to be an entrepreneur. I never thought I would even be in this space. I always thought that I would work for someone, right? And so to be in this space right now, of course, you're a little bit panicked, you're a little bit freaked out, but it's again that community, right? The community that I have in you and other women that are also entrepreneurs, right? And learning and not being afraid to fail, because I've made many mistakes, dealing with a challenge right now for a mistake that I haven't, that I think if I had known better, but there's no blueprint, right? Just like with our kids, there's no blueprint, there's no right or wrong with doing it. And sometimes you have to learn or fail forward and then pick up your pieces from there, right? So what I would say is just show yourself some grace. And I'm speaking to myself even in this moment right now, show yourself some grace. Be patient with yourself. Be willing to learn as well. Because for me, I've had to go back and take a couple courses. I'm currently in a course in a program right now. I've had to listen to an ultimate amount of podcasts and just networking sessions. Women in Biz has been like tremendous in helping me as well to kind of establish that foundation and that framework. But it's establishing that foundation, that framework, that's really going to help me to propel in my career as in this space, right? Moving forward. So take the baby steps, right? Figure out, what do you need right now? What do you need the most support around right now? And not being afraid to ask questions. That was, I think, the biggest thing for me is not that I thought I knew everything, but I was afraid to ask the question, right? Because maybe it was perceived that I should already know this, right? But you don't know what you don't know. So don't be afraid to ask the question. There are no stupid questions. If you don't know, you don't know. And there's no way that you're going to know if you don't ask the question. So that would be my biggest tip, is just show up and ask the questions, right? Don't be afraid. Easier said than done, yes. But be gentle with yourself and just surround yourself with people that you can trust, that you can be transparent with, and that you can ask questions openly to.
That's really a wonderful sentiment there. I love that. And so, like, I guess my next question is more focused on getting strategic, right? So you're in the middle of a job search and you want to be strategic because you've already spent so much time and energy putting out applications, and again, crickets.
Yeah.
So so what do you do to 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 maximize your time, energy, and your mental health?
Mm-hmm. Scheduling, I think, is huge. Don't just sit at your computer, throwing spaghetti at the wall. And by that, I mean just applying and applying. I think it's super important. And I say this to all of my clients is get specific. What is it that you truly want? Know what your motivators are, know what your demotivators are, but know exactly what the type of role, company, and culture that you're looking for, the type of responsibilities that you want to have, and the type of responsibilities that you don't want to have. So for example, let's say you were a team lead before, you were a manager, but now you're like, you know what, I don't want to manage people anymore. I'd rather be an individual contributor. So make sure that you're being specific with the type of roles that you're putting yourself out there for, and giving yourself some breaks, just as you would with a full-time job. You've got to take a step back, because there's nothing worse than feeling anxious, than feeling desperate, because that comes across in the interview as well, right? So do some research and figure out what is it that you really want in terms of, maybe it's HR, maybe it's consulting, maybe it's finance, maybe it's an analytical role. What is it that you really want, and what value can you bring to that role? So I always say, think of it as in terms of an employer has a problem or a challenge, and you're the solution to that, right? So how are you showing up as you being that value proposition to them? What is the value that you bring to the role? And once you get crystal clear on that, and you can focus on that and your strengths, it also helps you, with your job search, and will help you as well when you're actually get an opportunity to speak to the value that you add and what your strengths are and what the benefits would be of inviting you into an organization. So play to your strengths. Don't spend time just wasting time just applying for anything that's out there. Get specific with your job search and build relationships as well. So I think a lot of times, we hear about that hidden job market, but are you really tapping into it? So I say leverage your digital footprint, right? Connect with influencers and decision makers. So spend some of your time, yes, applying and looking at what the job boards are saying, what the market is saying, because it's really important to be well versed in that. But then also on the flip side, or on the downside or downtime that you have, who are you connecting with? Maybe you set a goal to connect with maybe 5 people a week or 5 people a day, depending, right? And then you're not asking necessarily for the job, but ask for those exploratory conversations. Get more insights and information on that organization or that industry, right? And take that time to do some research, because the more value that you can show that you have, or more knowledge that you can show that you have, the better you're going to position yourself as a subject matter expert in that space as well.
That's awesome. I love the tips there. I think, yeah, maximizing your network, being strategic about, the types of positions that you're applying for. Write down what you actually want, and what
Yeah.
kind of work environment. Do a little bit behind the scenes research. If you find
Mhm.
there's a company that you're really interested in working for, look at the makeup of the employees. Who is working there, because
Mhm.
that's important as well, right? Because if you want to be part of a diverse organization and they're all the same type of people, that's a red flag, right? So
Exactly.
consider that, and then consider, like, are there some degrees of separation to that person that you could then get connected to them. uh and ask them, like, be the interviewer just as much as the interviewee. Like, what,
Right.
ask people what they like about the company that they're working for. Maybe do some intel work to find out that, is this place even worthy of applying to, before you go through all the legwork of putting together a cover
Exactly.
letter. And that's the thing, right? Like, honestly, if you really want the job, you have to put in a compelling cover letter. You
Mhm.
have to, have a resume that really reflects that particular position, right? Like, don't
Mhm.
make it generic, because you'll get nowhere with that.
No,
So,
exactly.
yeah, what are some tips for working with a career coach like yourself, and why? Why would someone work with a career coach, and what do you get out of it?
Oh, great question. And one of the things or benefits that I find, I mean, I have my own coach as well, and I think
Hmm.
I have gotten leaps and bounds ahead in my career than I had maybe 16 years in HR. So the investment that I've made in myself is not something that I'm asking others to do that I haven't already done or also do in tandem, right? So working with a coach, it's like I've already done a lot of the research for you, right? I'm constantly researching, I'm constantly connecting, I'm constantly building relationships. So I always have my ear to the market to know what's kind of going on in various industries. So that's the first thing. The other thing is it's clarity, right? I help you to gain the clarity and the perspective that you need to show up as the top talent that you are, right? And I think sometimes we need that kind of subjective person that can kind of help us to guide us and to shape us on that career path or roadmap. So I help you to get strategic with your job search as well, so that you're not just applying for every and any job that you see out there, right? So it's getting crystal clear and concise. And also, I'm your blind spot. I'm your cheerleader and I'm your blind spot as well. So the things, because when you're so close to something, it's really hard for you to see. So it could be looking at your LinkedIn profile, it could be looking at your resume, it could be conducting mock interviews with you to tell you how do you show up when you're in these interview spaces, how are you articulating your value add. Maybe you even are so amazing in some things, but you don't see it, but I see it, right? So it's bringing that awareness to it. But I think there's so many benefits of having a coach that I've even established. It's that relationship, it's that accountability as well, because there are going to be days when you feel like, I don't feel like applying today. I don't feel like showing up today, right? But that accountability to say, you know what, you're awesome and you are going to show up today. And here's what we're going to do. So I assign my clients sometimes, I call it home practice more than homework, but it's home practice of things that you need to do or that you can do just to kind of maintain that momentum, because it can feel like you're going nowhere and you're doing nothing, right? When you're just applying and sitting there. But I also have little hacks and tricks with job search strategies and networking that I share with my clients as well. So there's a lot of value and benefit of having someone that can kind of be there to kind of mentor you and guide you through either a career transition or even just a job search, and providing you with like strategic strategies that are going to make you get there faster rather than doing it on your own.
Yeah, and as a past recruiter, you're definitely gonna know how to bring out
Mhm.
what recruiters and HR professionals are looking for, so I think that's awesome.
Right.
Let's talk a little bit about negotiating salary. I think that's another area that a career coach would really come in handy
Sure.
for, because, I'm assuming that, you're doing awesome work, you're helping this person land job interviews, they, potentially get to the part where they ask that dreaded question, "What's your
Mhm.
salary expectations?" How
Yeah.
do you answer that? It's
Well,
the worst question ever. Transparency, people.
you know what? It's
Post
coming
your
though.
job posting, post your job
Yeah, yeah,
salary bands. So like that is where inclusive hiring practices come in. But let's say like
100%.
most of the HR professionals out there, including HR associations, I'm not going to name which one, but I know that associations that are supposed to be on top of the best hiring practices
Yes.
do not post salary bands. And not only that, they put you through like crazy tests, potentially
Assessments, case
assessments,
studies.
case
Yeah.
studies. Like, let's do work for the employer and not have a clue how much money they're paying. So, what do you
Yeah.
say to that?
You
First of
know what?
all, let's do some advocacy there, and then how would you coach someone to get the best salary that they can, or
Well,
benefits, everything, right? Like
yeah.
everything's up for negotiation, isn't it?
And that's the key right there, Leigh, is to know that everything is negotiable,
Yeah.
right? So you receive the offer, you always look at it from top to bottom. So I'm talking about vacation time, flex time, benefits. Obviously, the salary is uber important, but flexibility, work-life balance, like that all comes into it. Are you able to work from home, or do you have to actually go into the office 2 or 3 times a week? So I have a client right now who's going through that. She's been at home for the last 2 years, but now she's being asked to go back into the office. So how do we negotiate that? Is her compensation going to be the same, or is she going to now receive extra compensation for now taking the go, or her gas and her mileage, going to the office? And on top of that, she was working in, well, her home office was in the city that she was living in, and now she's got to commute downtown, right? So to me, that's a whole new negotiation process that she needs to be confident. So that's the other benefit of having a coach as well, is I help you to articulate and to craft your messaging to your manager or superior, to go to them with, okay, this is what I'm looking for, or this is what I would like. How can we kind of come to terms to make sure that this is a win-win for both individuals? So the first thing is the market. Know what the market is saying. And right now it's a candidate market, right? So you are definitely valuable, right? But know what you're bringing to the table. So do your market research, know and it depends on the organization size as well. But no good organization is going to want to see a top talent leave the organization or reject one of their offers, right? So whether it's be compensated, know what you want. That's the first thing. Know what you want, know what your kind of bottom line is, but also know what you want. And I always say, ask for a little bit more, because you never know, you might just get it. And I never say to share, or I always say, don't share exactly what you're making or what you were making in your last role, right? Always kind of scale it up a little bit, and then know what your middle is and what you're down, what would make you happy, right? And then you go in with that, because you never know, you may just end up getting it, right? So never sell yourself short, but always know kind of what your non-negotiables are, what your midpoint is, and what would make you like jump through the roof to accept the offer.
I love it. So that that you just I like that last thing you said. You never know, you might just get it, right?
You might
And
just
I'll
get it.
share a really I don't know, I think it's an inspiring story, and I know you know it, but right now I've been transitioning into to teaching, and I'm currently a professor in marketing at the University of Guelph Humber, and I just got a job. So this is like, I guess, my biz buzz announcement that
Yeah.
I got a job working for York Continuing Education as a professor as well there. And I will let you in on a little secret, which, well, you already know the secret, but I guess I'm letting the world in. I bombed, I mean, with a capital B, bombed the interview, because I had to put together a presentation,
Mhm.
and I practiced and I practiced and I practiced in the PowerPoint thing. And of course, I'm trying to make it cool and fancy and put on
Yeah.
these awesome transitions. And so during my presentation, even though I had practiced and this didn't happen, but because it was like the live play, it was auto forwarding my slides. And it doesn't take a lot for me to get off schedule. Like my brain is going, "You're a failure," and then I'm not concentrating, and I can't, like,
Yeah.
even today when I was trying to introduce, what my company does, I just had a brain freeze because there's a lot going on. I have an electrician downstairs in in our basement. My dog is whining. The garbage truck is going by, so I had a hard time concentrating. And so in that situation, I just stopped and said, I got to go and do this over again. So in my interview, what happened was, I stopped and I said, this is not going the way I expected. This is what happened. And I tried to get through it the best I could.
Yeah.
But it was disastrous. But I just addressed it. I just said, like, at the end of the interview, I explained, how I felt about it, and I then decided, like, so I got off the interview, and had not right away. The next day, I kind of had a few tears over it because I was so mad at myself. But what I had done that day was I didn't make time to get upset. I just went right into problem solving mode. I'm like, okay, I'm
Yeah.
just going to
How are
re-record
you gonna fix it?
the session, which I did. And, I put together all of I included the PowerPoint slides as well. So I just put together this, compelling story as to why, I still deserve the job. And, and perhaps I was being more hard on myself than what he was seeing, but still, it was just, to me, I was just dying inside.
Yeah.
So, but anyway, long story short, I didn't hear for a while, and then all of a sudden, I get this message saying, "Yes, we're going to hire you." And I was like, I can't believe it. I'm like, this is the greatest story. This
Yeah.
mistake will be my story forevermore to encourage people not to give up.
You know what? I love that story, Leigh. And it's funny because I have a client that had a similar story a couple of years ago too, where she was like, I bombed the interview. And very similar to you, I was like, okay, how are we going to fix it? What are we going to do? So we put together, very similar to you, we put together a presentation. And I'm like, okay, this is what we're going to do. What would your 30, 60, 90 day look like if you were to be hired for this role? So we put that together and she presented it. And same, she ended up getting the opportunity because it showed them, yeah, maybe I screwed up during this time, but and it goes back to being HR professionals or hiring managers, show people some grace. You know what I mean? They are very nervous and they want this so badly to work with you and your organization. So they're trying their hardest to show up, right? So show them some compassion and some grace, and they might mess up, right? But I love the fact that you went back and you're like, you know what, I'm going to record it. Even if you hadn't gotten the job, Leigh, I'm sure that you would have felt better just knowing that, you know what, I at least had the opportunity now to show them the best of me, right? And then you just leave it at the table. And that's exactly what she did. She sent them a presentation and she's like, I know I did. I don't even know if she said that. I know I didn't do well in the interview, but she's like, thank you so much for your time. Here is something that I can see, being my transition into this role with your organization, what it would look like in the next 30, 60, 90 days. And she put it together and presented it to them. And who else is doing that? And that's kind of one of my secrets. That's one of my hidden gems that I work with my clients on. But who else is doing that? So what is your differentiator, that's going to show up? So the fact that you did that, they probably weren't even expecting you to do it. Right?
Yeah, well, I mean, I just couldn't imagine that I would have gotten the job had I not shown that I actually know what I'm doing.
Yeah.
And, like, it's one of those things, right? So, like, now that's just another tool in my toolbox. Like, even if I didn't get the job, at least I taught myself, oh, okay, so there are some anomalies in, practicing and PowerPoint and stuff like that. At least I wasn't being paid to facilitate and that happened, right? Like,
Right.
it was a
Right.
job interview and it sucked, but I would have, even if I didn't get the job, I would have learned not to mess with transitions, and to practice actually within Zoom, which is
Mhm.
another thing, right? Because one thing that you'll notice with Zoom is that your speaker notes don't show up. I don't know if there's some hack that you can do to show your speaker notes when you're in
There
Zoom.
is. I'll show you later. Yes, there is.
Okay, thank you. Good. I need to know that because I still don't
There
know
is.
how to do that.
Yeah.
But yeah, so you're always learning, you're always evolving. Well, Kadine, it's been so great chatting with you. Let's
Same.
let's leave with some tips for HR professionals. How can
Mhm.
we help them get a better reputation in the job market? What can they do to make themselves more accessible, more inclusive,
Mhm.
more supportive, but do in a way that doesn't impact their time, energy, or resources. What are some things that they can do?
I think set the expectation right from the beginning of the conversation, right? Like if you know you're like, for me, I remember in one of the corporate roles that I had, I was the lead talent acquisition specialist. Like I was it. So there was no way that I could 100% get back to every single candidate that I spoke to. So right out of the gates, I would say to you, you know what? I will do my best to get back to you. You'll either get an automated email from me, or you'll get an automated email from the system, an email from me directly, or I will call you. It'll be one of those methods, but I will never leave you hanging. I will definitely get back to you. Right. So right there, I've told them at least she's going to get back to me. It may be her personally, it may be a system generated, or it may be an email that I'm going to get. Right. So just
Hmm.
set the tone and the expectation with them and let them know kind of what the process will look like. If it's going to be two interview process, maybe there's going to be a case study, letting people know what to expect during the process and just being as transparent as you can with the process as well.
Yeah, I love that. Like, I love seeing job postings that indicate, what the benefits are, what's in it for the candidate. Talk about, even if it has to be, not specifics, but talk about the things that you offer.
Mhm.
Because you know what, like, it's not, I don't think that anyone is going to put their best self forward if they don't have enough information about what to expect,
Yeah,
you know?
exactly.
Because,
Exactly.
like, there could be an incredible job opportunity and it's not getting a lot of, especially for smaller companies, which we tend to focus on, right? That don't,
Mhm.
when TD puts out a position, of course it's going to get,
Hundreds.
thousands of, yeah, hundreds, thousands of
Hundreds and
applications,
thousands of
right?
applicants. Yeah.
Yeah, of course. But a smaller company, they have to work harder to attract um, the right client, the right
Right
candidate,
caliber candidates, yes.
right? And so things like salary transparency, so putting, like,
Mhm.
what that is, what to expect in your first, like, I like your 30, 60, 90 day, like some
Mhm.
companies will outline, what kind of support someone gets when they join the organization, what
Mhm.
the employment process is, including dates, and like you said, what tests are involved, if any.
Mhm.
But I think the last piece of advice I would leave is ask someone who is going through a job search, or someone that has some expertise. Ask them, like, what does this, when you read this job description, what are you feeling about, like, what would you apply for this job? Like, if you're,
Mhm.
let's say that you're, in that industry, right? Would you apply for this job, or is it just
Right.
not giving enough, garnering enough information or excitement?
Mhm.
Is the employer brand really shining through? Like, is it all that? Because I get it. Like, I know when someone is interviewing, it's last minute, it's stressful, it's like, a lot of things to put together. And so, like, you may not think about everything. So maybe having that checklist where, you think about all the things that a candidate is stressing about, right? Like,
Yeah.
you have the opportunity to impact someone's mental health in the job search, either in a positive way or a negative
Or
way.
negative
So,
way.
with companies like Glassdoor, where you can leave reviews, or, people now being more candid about sharing when they've been, like, duped in a job search process, like, people are writing about it. So your
Yeah,
reputation is at stake as employers. So I want to
exactly.
leave that. So as the HR strategist, I'm here to help people to understand what they can do to be a better employer and more inclusive hiring practices. Kadine is our resident career coach at both Women in Biz Network and Be Happy HR. Kadine, how can they find out more about you? And do you offer an introductory
I
chat?
do. Yeah, absolutely. So you can reach out to me on LinkedIn. I'm on Instagram as well as Facebook. Send me a DM. Conversations are free. I always offer a free discovery kind of consultation,
Yeah.
because it's for many reasons to see if we're aligned and if we are a fit. And if not for me, I love that I have an extensive network as well. So I may even be able to refer you to someone who's a better fit for you. But I love having conversations with individuals because I think, to give of your time is not just a gift, but it's a heartfelt desire to uplift one another. And I think we could all use some uplifting right now. So don't be afraid to reach out. Like I said, no question is a stupid question. but just having someone that you can kind of be transparent with, that you can kind of let your guard down and let them know exactly what's going on and where you are in your search or your transition, you'll reap so much benefits from that.
That's amazing. I love that. So let's end on that note. Thank you so much for listening, everyone. And yeah, this stays live. So, you know, if you have questions that you want answered,
Yeah,
Kadine and
please
I will
reach
keep,
out.
you know, we'll keep looking at the social commentary that will continue to flow here. So do ask your questions. Um, and yeah, thank you. And I look forward to hopefully doing this with you in another week or so.
That would be awesome.
Okay.
All
Thanks,
right.
everyone.
Bye,
Bye-bye.
everyone. Thank you.